Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to today's second half. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and leave a comment. It all really does help, and it's fast and free. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. Let me preface by saying this happened around 10 years ago. Also, I've always been very skeptical of paranormal stuff, and I'm not at all superstitious, but one encounter will always stick with me. I grew up with my grandparents in a quiet suburb outside of Washington, D.C., and our house was only a few hundred yards from a large park called Sleepy Hollow Woods. I used to play in those woods as a child, alone or with friends, and never had any issues. I loved the outdoors and explored the woods thoroughly. However, I would never stay out after dark, of course. My mother grew up here as well, and would always tell stories about the woods, and believed they were haunted. She had plenty of creepy things happen with her. For instance, when she was younger, they had 2 family labs. They were super friendly, and my mother and uncles would walk them through the woods all the time. One time my mother was walking alone with the dogs around dusk, when she came across what she describes as a ripped-off deer haunch, lying covered in blood in the middle of the trail. There were no other deer parts or body or blood anywhere to be seen, just this random bloody leg. She described it as having the appearance of being just ripped off, definitely not cut. Obviously freaked out, she took the dogs and just started heading home. All of a sudden, near the exit of the park, the dogs completely froze in their tracks and just started growling into the tree line. This was very unlike them, as they were super friendly with both people and other animals, and were quite large and never feared a thing. However, as my mother kept trying to pull them along and see what they were growling out, their tails went between their legs and they started whimpering, refusing to move forward. It was then my mom said she had seen a large, almost 8-foot tall dark figure with glowing red eyes moving between the trees, staring right at her. She immediately turned around with dogs and fled, taking a different exit out of the woods. My uncle has also said he has seen this red-eyed creature before, but never a clear view, always a silhouette. Keep in mind, there are no bears or anything of the sort around here that would do that to a deer. On another occasion, some years later, my mom recalled walking with our old golden retriever near the woods. Again, the retriever was the sweetest dog in the world and loved everyone. But my mom came across an old creepy lady feeding and talking quietly to some wild rabbits, one on the sidewalk/trail. Immediately our dog started growling at the woman, something my mother has never heard her do before. My mom immediately apologized to the lady and walked around her with her dog, tugging her along. As she continued to walk, she came across a circle of rabbits all standing perfectly still and just staring at her. My mom promptly ran home. My mother and uncles have other stories, but I've always thought they were full of crap, either just imagining things or making them up to scare me, since I played in those woods so many times and never had any issues. However, my older brother used to go in on nightly walks through the woods, and he told me that he had seen the red-eyed monster and other mysterious, creepy encounters. I was around 15 or 16 at the time. I loved ghost stories, but never encountered anything like it. So I was able to convince him to go out ghost hunting with me. Of course, I thought it was all a bunch of silly bullcrap anyway. The first time we went out, we had friends over. We were hanging out late at night, smoking weed and telling ghost stories. Of course, we had mentioned the haunted forest. We were living at the house down the street from our grandparents at the time, so still practically next door to the woods. My friends all thought it'd be fun if we went into the forest to search for some ghosts and monsters and have a good laugh. We waited until it was about 2:30 and headed out. There was a fairly large group of us, maybe 6 to 8 of us total, including my brother and myself. As we were walking through this pitch black forest using our phones as flashlights, I kid you not, all of our phones turned off at the same time. Of course, the girls in our group started freaking out, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure we all did. But we were also kind of laughing at the nonsense of it all. There was no noise anywhere other than us. The forest was completely dead silent, and after a few moments, everyone was able to get their phones turned on and working again. We decided to head home at that point. Could have been a freak accident. I'm really not sure. The second time I went with my brother and a couple of other friends, this time a much smaller crew, I think 3 or 4 altogether. Same as before, we thought it'd be fun and silly to go out ghost hunting at night and see my brother's little Sasquatch friend. This time it was all different, however. The moment we entered the forest, things got immediately weird. The forest felt unnaturally dark, and our lights barely reached the tree line on the either side. We brought our flashlights this time. We also immediately felt a large sense of dread, danger, adrenaline, and like we were being watched from all sides. Quite frankly, it was terrifying. As only moments before, we were joking and laughing and telling ghost stories, but we all immediately shut up and felt it not even 30 yards from the road/entrance to the forest. Whatever, we continued slowly walking deeper into the woods, talking and nervously laughing as we peered about with our flashlights. The forest dead silent when suddenly, all at once, we heard what sounded like what can only be described as several thousand monkeys screaming and screeching at us from the treetops and tree lines in all different directions all around us. The noise was overwhelmingly loud and deafening. I've never heard anything like it or the sense. It's hard to describe, but angry, hateful monkeys all crying out in anger at us is the best way to describe it. And those cries were definitely targeted at us. The sense of danger and dread immediately jumped to 11, and we wasted no time turning tail and sprinting from the forest exit. The sounds of 1,000 lost souls screaming incredibly loud chasing us from above and around. Obviously, we saw no animals or anything in the trees or around us when our flashlights were lighting everything up, but we're also more preoccupied with getting out of there. Like I said, we were only perhaps a few 100 feet from the entrance of the forest, so it took no time at all. The moment we stepped out of the forest and into the light of the nearby street lamp, the forest fell dead quiet. Not a rustle, a whisper, nothing. For those of you wondering, there are not any wild monkeys in those woods, nor anything else I could think of that would make those sounds, but that crap was loud and obviously terrifying. The third and final time I worked up the courage to go ghost hunting and find these evil little monkeys once and for all sealed the deal with me. I'll never forget what happened on that night. A few months, or perhaps a year or so after our encounter with the angry monkeys, air quotes, I was still upset that I had never encountered the red-eyed giant, and convinced myself that the prior experience was probably just some rabid fox or something. It wasn't. My older brother agreed to go into the woods one last time with me, as he didn't really fear anything, and to be honest, neither did I. I was some edgy-ass 15 or 16-year-old anyway, this time. If I had heard them yelling at me, I was going to yell back at them and demand them to show themselves. Or something, I don't know. I just wanted to prove to myself that night really happened and that I was not crazy. The setting was perfect, full moon, and it was about to hit 2 in the morning. My brother brought a couple of knives, throwing knives. I brought a large quarterstaff. I had my black belt training and bow staff from my childhood. We set out on our little adventure. From the very start, things were different from our previous encounter for the better. There were no unnatural feelings of being watched, no sense of fear or dread, no sense of panic. We walked all throughout the woods, sticking to the major paths. The occasional cricket chirp and the sounds of the nearby creek flowing downriver were the only noises we heard. At one point, a bush I was walking past bristled, and something fled away, causing me to almost piss myself. But I figured it was probably a raccoon or fox or something we had spooked. After about an hour of pointlessly walking around, we decided to pack it up. As we started heading back home, my brother would occasionally stop in the path and begin listening intensely. For what I don't know, as I heard nothing around us. He just said he thought he heard something. A few minutes later, he stopped and grabbed my arm tightly. I looked up at him and asked WTF was the big idea, as we were almost out of the forest and I just wanted to get home at this point. He quickly hushed me, told me to shut up, so I did. Then he whispered that someone was following us, though he never once turned around or anything. At that precise moment, I caught the worst goosebumps of my life and felt the presence staring at us from behind. I very slowly began to turn and look behind us. As I did, I saw, I don't know, a shadow or a silhouette literally creeping up behind us. The best way to describe it was large, possibly 8 feet, with glowing red eyes, silently walking down the path toward us. Once it saw that I had seen it, it immediately crouched low and dashed straight out of the path and into the tree line. At a full sprint, but without making a noise, and straight at us. I remember just yelling, "Run!" and we ran. This thing started chasing us. I had never felt more danger, more raw hatred emanating from someone or something before. I knew it was going to kill us. And we were just sprinting for our lives, like this maze through the forest. It chased us the entire way, just barely behind us. It must have been going fast to keep up because we were booking it. I never turned around, nor did my brother. For that we would have slowed us down just a tiny bit. But we didn't get the sense that it was closing in. I could feel it reaching out to grab me from my neck or collar, just inches, keeping myself from it as I ran for my dear life. At this point, we could also hear it clearly kicking up gravel and dirt behind us, knowing there was no way we would make it to the proper exit in time. I yelled at my brother to follow me off the main path and through a small hidden trail that I knew from my young childhood. We burst out of the forest and into a lighted lawn of what used to be my best friend's backyard. As we got out of the forest and into the lights of the yard, we immediately stopped and turned to face our attacker. But it just stood there, just out of light and into the tree line, menacingly glaring at us with hatred. I never got a good view of it, not like I had when I first saw it on the trail creeping up at us. But I could sense it was there, and almost barely see the large, almost 8-foot figure moving amongst the tree line, staring us down. Full of adrenaline, I yelled at it to come out and fight, instead of creeping around. I had my staff out in front of me, and my brother had a knife in each hand, and we were prepared to defend ourselves. Suddenly something hit me in the chest. Stunned, I looked down to see a few pieces of gravel from the main path where we were standing earlier at my feet. It threw it at me. My brother saw this as well, and immediately threw one of his knives into the forest from where the rocks had come, and we turned and ran home. We have never been back to those woods since, and will never be caught in them past dusk. I don't know if it was an angry hobo or something living in the woods or what, but from memory, the best I can describe what I saw was a very large silhouette of something humanoid walking, creeping quietly on us. And once I saw it, and it saw that I noticed it, it hunched down low and sprinted silently into the tree line straight for us. I have never felt such danger or hatred in my life. I know for a fact that who or whatever it was meant to do us great harm. I've since heard stories of crawlers and other things, and perhaps this was an example of one, I don't know. But my brother swears on his life that he didn't set that up to scare us or have anything to do with what happened, and that he was just as terrified at the time as I was. Oh, and he never did find his throwing knife. Dumbass actually went back and looked for it in the morning. Unfortunately, my brother never got to see it. He said he had heard it and sensed it following us, but he never got a view of the thing. Anyway, I don't know what the deal is with this forest, but I highly recommend anyone to stay away from it, far away. And yeah, for a skeptic, I can agree that it's unlikely that was a person. In fact, I am certain it was not. I've always thought and referred to it as the creeper. And yeah, it did have glowing red eyes. I kind of stopped doing this, but I kind of want to talk about that encounter. I used to do this a lot, talk about each encounter after. Well, you've got the red eyes, which many people have encountered red eyes when seeing a Dogman. But in North Jersey, there's the old red eyes, which could be a Sasquatch, could be a Dogman. I'm not sure. Now, I've heard from a subscriber who had sent me an audio of what sounded like the jungles of South America or Africa with these monkeys and all of these just non-indigenous creatures to the Americas sounding off in the middle of Georgia. You know, like just whatever. Imagine the Amazon and then imagine that sound in your backyard in Georgia. Very strange. That subscriber had a Dogman encounter as well as a Sasquatch encounter off of their property, the Sasquatch one. Now, this creature, or whatever you want to call it, was obviously very fast. The sense of dread was felt. And I don't know, maybe it's just that maybe these things can scream or mimic or whatever these noises to just completely freak us out. Maybe there was more than just one in the woods that night when they heard these evil monkey sounds as they described. To me, it could be a Dogman, could be a Sasquatch, or it could be something completely different. And that's just as terrifying. Today's second encounter. I've been a park ranger for 11 years. I'm not going to say where I work, but it's a very large park. This experience took place in the spring of 2008. The park that I had worked at had a very big drinking problem with youths trespassing all the time. We had calls almost every night. I worked nights most of my career. One day, a member of the public who was camping had called in saying that there was a large group of youths making noise and drinking. I was dispatched and started walking over in the dark. I tried to sneak up. This was a breach of my standard operation procedure. To try and apprehend as many as I could, and managed to apprehend 4 or 5. Don't clearly remember. And all the others ran into the woods. My prediction was that there were as many as 20 from what I saw. I radioed through to dispatch to get a couple of the deputies out here to take over. Deputies arrived at this point. I was all alone in the middle of nowhere. I radioed through to try to get a guide back to a more civilized part of the woods at this point. I'd already walked quite far and the radio connection was breaking up. We had bad radios back then. As I approached a part of the woods I was familiar with, I looked behind and saw something walking up very slowly. I called out hello to no response. At this point, radio contact was back. I radioed in saying I've spotted someone. The figure was maybe 40 meters away. I then called out stop and are you okay, with no response. As the figure came closer, it just disappeared. I couldn't make out what it was. The next day was a normal day. I mentioned to my friend who had worked there for 10 years. I mentioned what had happened, and he made a scared face and said, "It's nothing," got up and walked away. In 2013, I left to work at the sheriff's office, never mentioned to anyone except some close friends. Well, we've been drinking. Today's third experience comes to us from Poland. Back in Valentine's Day, me and a friend decided we were going to go for a walk because we didn't want to spend this day alone. We were on our common walking routine through a forest near her house, like 10 or 15 minutes by foot from her house. In the forest, there are some houses and a very good asphalt road that's typical Polish forest. I don't know if it's important, but it's a forest where there are trees only with leaves, no trees with needles. It was close to 5 when we were walking and talking, and I noticed the birds and the surroundings are getting quiet. I made note of that and started to observe the forest carefully. I decided that if that weird ambience would still be present when we got to cross the road, which is exactly in the middle of the forest and our route will take her back to town. When we were getting close to that place, I heard some very loud and very strange for Polish forest sound. It was quiet, and suddenly I heard this scary laugh. I saw that in the forest from place where probably was the source of the sound, birds started to fly away from that place. I stopped, and a moment after that, my friend did the same thing. I said to her, "Did you hear that?" She didn't hear anything because she had her headphones in on one ear and was listening to music. I told her what had happened. She started laughing and joking that we got hyenas in our forest, but she also noticed the silence in the forest. When we got to cross, I suggested that it's Valentine's Day, so we could go back to town and eat something. I knew she'd agree. Just before that cross, there is a part of the road which is open on both sides, and it has fields. When we were going back to town, there I was observing the forest so I could notice if something was close. I didn't see anything, but I was feeling like something was observing me from the tree line on the opposite side of the field on my right. It was also the side of the forest from which I had heard that sound. We get safe back to town and nothing else happened. Later, I studied sounds of animals, and it really sounded like a hyena laugh, but more powerful. I also studied more closely what animals are in Poland and can make that type of sound. I discovered that Poland have more animals than I thought, but none of them could have made that sound. There were encounters with Dogman with hyena head, but did any of them say anything about the Dogman laughing like a hyena? Can Dogmen do that? I was also feeling observed in the forest and had that uneasy feeling. We were going to that forest often, especially during the summer. I heard that Dogman are very active during that season, and when the night was falling, that feeling was bigger. One time, when in the summer, I was there with my friend, another friend, and my brother, my friend, the same with who I was with on Valentine's Day, stopped and was observing another field. On that field was corn, so I joined her and started to look. I didn't see anything, and when I asked what that was about, she said it was nothing, and she started to walk again, but faster. I think the fact that was cornfield is not a coincidence. Another time, when me and the same group were taking her home, my friend insists that we should take the long way. We were walking through a meadow, which is like 5 to 10 minutes from her home. It was dark, something like 10 p.m., so we were using flashlights on our phone. In one moment, she shined her light at something on the meadow, not the path. It was next to it. I would say it was 5 or more meters from the path, and she screamed and started to run. I don't know what she saw there, but we had to go after her because we didn't know that meadow, and we didn't want to get lost. When we caught her, she again told us it was nothing. I know her, and I know that if that would be a dog, cat, snake, deer, or even boar, she wouldn't have reacted like this. She would have just told us about it. So it had to have been something big, scary, or unknown to her. We were talking about Dogman, but she didn't believe in any cryptids. I just want to ask you, do you think that something can be in this forest? For now, there was only one encounter in Poland according to a Dogman story I had heard, but it was poorly written and it sounded fake. I still have no clue what I saw on that Valentine's Day. I connected all 3 of these experiences, and now I think that my forest, town, and country are not safe. Well, I'd have to say Poland is the old country, and there are a lot of kind of dogman, werewolf legends in that area, so I would not doubt at all that there would be a dogman lurking through Poland at any time. Definitely creepy. Definitely creepy. I don't know why your friend wouldn't tell you, hey, I just saw something terrifying, but maybe she was just trying to protect you guys too. So, and today's final experience. I was around 9 when I experienced my first supernatural cryptid monster sighting. I was playing in my backyard while my mom planted flowers. We have a small fenced-in area connected to the house, then a small stretch of grass that goes down and up, and then the woods. The woods are a decent size and connect to a large nature preserve. So, we sometimes have deer or coyote in the backyard. I was in the fenced-in area playing with our dogs and digging around in the garden bed, trying to find worms and beetles, when I heard a cat start to meow in the woods. We have a bunch of stray cats in the neighborhood, and they like to hunt and play in the woods, so I didn't think anything of it. However, when a second cat began to yowl, I got worried. I assumed that they were fighting. I start walking up the steps to our porch, where the back door was, so I could get my mom or dad. We had dealt with cats getting hurt before, including losing eyes, ears, tips of tails, and fights. So I wanted to see if either of my parents would go back there and break the fight up, considering I was not allowed to go back there myself. I made it about halfway up the stairs when a third cat joined in, and I knew that something was wrong. I slowly made my way back down the steps and watched the woods. A fourth cat began to yowl, then a fifth. I stopped counting after that. More and more cats joined in, creating a chorus of horrible noise that scared me very badly. Then the dogs started. The neighborhood dogs began to bark. They'd yip and yowl and growled right along with the cats. My own dogs freaked out as well, sprinting toward the fence and slamming into it over and over, snarling and barking angrily like someone was right in front of them. I was frozen and spot terrified. I waited for my mom to come back out and break me from my trance, but she didn't. It was only later that I learned that she had heard the cats and dogs all freaking out, but just ignored it. Suddenly, all the animals stopped. It was dead silent. We had big family living all around us, ones with noisy children. We lived close to an interstate. We lived close to a mall. However, all of the noise that was usually there was gone. Even the birds stopped chirping. I heard a twig snap to the far right edge of the woods and turned to look, and that's when I saw it. All black, extremely tall, long arms that almost touched the ground, and long legs. It was unnaturally thin. It slowly walked across the edge of the forest, its arms swinging lazily at its side. The sticks under it cracked and broke with ease. It lifted its long, thin leg and stepped over a fallen log, one at a time. Once it got over the log, it turned its head toward me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It did not have a face. It was just a black void, the infinite void of space and time. There was nothing. I stared at it for a while, not blinking, as its face stayed turned towards mine. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The thing finally turned back toward the woods. It took a few more steps, breaking sticks and trampling the dead leaves, and disappeared into the trees. Once it was gone, I ran and told my mom what had happened. She brushed it off. This is when she told me about hearing the animals, but not doing anything. She chalked it up to my imagination. You see, I had gotten really into Bigfoot, watching all of these documentaries and stuff, and I wanted to see one really bad. At the time, I was super excited, thinking that I had seen Bigfoot. I told all my friends, and everyone thought it was cool. It wasn't until a few years later that I realized that the creature was not Bigfoot. It didn't look anything like what people had seen. It wasn't big, muscular, hairy man-beast. It was skinny, all black, and tall, faceless as well. It sunk in that what I had seen that day wasn't just some childish urban legend. It was something that I had never seen before or since. I have no idea what I saw. I have no idea what saw me. When I first brought this up to people, they asked me if I was watching Slender Man videos. First of all, I didn't know anything about Slender Man until years later. Secondly, even if Slender Man is real, this was not it. It fits most of the description, but its face was all black, void. I still don't know what I saw. If anyone has any ideas, please share with me. It would put my mind at peace just knowing what I saw, at least. Yeah, that's kind of hard, not knowing where you are located. I would say possibly a crawler, but yet I think we use that word crawler to explain anything that we don't know what it is, you know? It's kind of like the go-to word, crawler. I hate the word the rake, so I'm not going to say it. I said it. Never mind. But who knows? I mean, what if these creatures that are like the crawler / rake, what if they're aliens? What if there's some sort of malicious alien? I mean, even though we've seldom heard attacks of these things, I'm sure they do attack people. Maybe maybe they have a large part in people becoming missing in our national and state forests. Who knows? But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Today's second half, I mean. And with that, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life. Thank you, everyone, for all of your support.